Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is February 19th, 2013. We are here as part of the Case Western Reserve Social Justice Institute Oral Life Narrative Project, focusing on East Cleveland. I am Brandon King, here with Hank Williams. Hank Smith. We'll have to edit that out. Hank Smith. Sorry about that, Hank. And our interviewee for today is Grennetta.
Grennetta Taylor.
Grennetta Taylor.
Yes.
Got it right here in front of me. Grennetta Taylor, how are you today?
I'm good.
For the record, can you give us your name and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Grennetta Taylor. I'm a long-term East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights resident. And I'm here today to do an interview about life history and my history and my life here in East Cleveland. I work for Housing and Urban Development as a housing specialist. In addition to residing here in East Cleveland, I've resided in a few places in Cincinnati. I always say the big C's in Ohio: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati.
Grennetta, we're going to go over a little of the biographical sketch just to make sure we have this. What is your date of birth?
12/29/58.
Birthplace?
Cleveland, Ohio.
10 Cleveland schools?
East Cleveland schools.
East Cleveland.
Yes.
Okay. Siblings?
Two brothers.
How about your parents?
My dad, James Taylor, mother Juanita Taylor, deceased.
So, Grennetta, can you tell us about the history of your family? Where's your family from?
My family is from Alabama. My dad is from Troy, Alabama, which is south of Montgomery. And my mother is from Greensboro, Alabama, which is, we always refer to Hale County, Alabama. And that is in the southwestern part of the state on the Mississippi border. My mom and dad were about the same age. My mother ended up coming to Cleveland with friends of hers. She was in school. She didn't want to go back to college, and she wanted to come to Cleveland. She is the oldest of 18. And my dad ended up, how did he get up here? He had relatives here too, but he went to the Army. After he left the Army, he came to Cleveland, and he had relatives here. And he wanted to leave the South. It was Jim Crow South for him. He wanted to get out of Jim Crow. My mother just wanted to get out the house taking care of kids.
So, Grennetta, both your parents are from Alabama?
Yes.
Did they meet in Alabama? Did they meet somewhere else?
They met here in Cleveland. They were introduced by my dad's cousin.
And you say that your parents, they met here in Cleveland, both from Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
But they were introduced.
Right, they were introduced here by my dad's cousin. My mother knew my dad's cousin. She actually lived, back then people used to take you into their houses. And she had a cousin who was from that area, and they lived here, and they had this big house down on 71st Street between Huff and Chester. And so they used to take in boarders. So she lived there with them as a boarder, and in payment for her board, she cooked and cleaned and everything for her cousins who were older cousins, and they worked. So she took care of the house.
Okay.
And so she knew my dad's cousin, and my dad's cousin introduced them. Hey, I got a nice girl, I want you to meet, da-da-da-da.
But no family knowing each other from Alabama?
No.
And your father came to Cleveland because of?
He came up, it was after he got out the Army, and he wanted to leave Jim Crow, because he did do a couple years at Alabama A&M. Then he went into the Army. And then after he left the Army, he came up here because he had uncles who had been up here for a long time and some cousins who had been up here for quite some time. So he came up here and stayed with them for a little bit, and then, got his own thing going.
Did your father talk much about Jim Crow at all to you?
All the time.
Is there anything you could tell us that sticks out in your mind from one of the stories he told you?
One of the things that he does that I found unique, because I'm always curious about people who came up, migrated from the South during that time. And when I meet people, I usually ask their stories, and a lot of them don't like to talk about it. But my dad loves to talk about it. And one of the things that I've always been impressed with in terms of his stories is he actually talks about how it felt, for him to be under that kind of system, and he understands it, from a political and social aspect. It wasn't just what they did to us. He understands why that system, why they did it, But he talked a lot about, how it felt, how oppressive it was, how you had to stand there and watch things, and couldn't do anything about it, and how it was about fear, instilling fear in people, and how you raised boys during that time, in order to keep them alive, hey, this is certain behavior you have to display, a certain demeanor you have to display when you're in certain places, and certain places you can't go, and, just a mere act of assertion or perceived act of assertion could be a problem, And yeah, he talks about it a lot.
What year did he leave?
I think he came up here in 50, I want to say 52, 54.
How about your mom?
My mom came up here, I'm not sure when she came up here, but it might have been like 54 or something like that. Because I think she was, it was around 57, about a year before, 56, 57, yeah. So they were up here then.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What type of work did your father do?
He was a realtor. He worked for B.F. Goodrich for a while, and he drove a cab for a while, and he ended up in real estate where and then he was also a bar owner, and real estate and a bar owner for about 20, 30 years.
And your mom?
And my mother was a housekeeper. She worked for a nursing home. Several nursing, couple nursing homes. She in Cleveland, east side and west side. One on the east side, I think one on the west side, and a couple on the east side.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now they met in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Around 57.
Mm-hmm.
And you were born?
58.
58. So you were born in Cleveland?
Mm-hmm.
What year did you move to East Cleveland? Or did you move to East
Cleveland?
Yeah,
we lived in Cleveland on the east side and Cleveland on the west side for a while. We left the west side and moved to East Cleveland in 65.
What was life like in Cleveland? And where did you live in Cleveland?
I don't remember anything about the east side of Cleveland, but on the west side of Cleveland, I stayed off of Bel Air. And it was nice. What I remembered about over there in the contrast when we moved over there, that the houses were newer over there. And it seemed a lot more open, not as many trees. We lived like sort of near the railroad tracks. And I remember the Kroger. There was a Kroger over there. But it was nice.
What do you remember?
I had a big dog.
About the people?
Next door, there were kids that lived next door to me that I remember playing with a lot, and I had a big dog named Joyce. That was about the most vivid thing I remember.
About school?
I didn't go to school over there. I was too young for school.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you moved into East Cleveland in '65.
Mm-hmm.
Part of East Cleveland?
Carlion Road, on the Euclid end of Carlion Road.
Okay. Okay. Now at this time, '65, 2 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Were they born yet?
Yeah. My youngest brother was probably about a year old when we moved here, and then my other brother, he was probably about 2.
So
yeah.
You're the
I'm the
sister?
oldest, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about Carlion in 1965.
Carlion Road, 1965. It was a good place. A lot of kids, a lot of good neighbors. But I always thought our side of the bridge was better than the other side of the bridge for some reason. I always thought we was a little more civilized on our side of the bridge. Because they like to break glass under the bridge, and it was always the kids on the other side of the bridge.
I take it you were on the side from Euclid.
Right.
Down, okay.
Right. Yeah. You know that's the civilized side of the bridge.
How was Carlion different from the west side?
It was different because a lot more black folks, and there were a lot more people. The street was larger because our street on the west side was a little smaller. So and less traffic. So we were between Euclid and Superior, so we had a lot more traffic. And my grandparents came to live with us. They came up from down south. My cousin was there, and also my aunt was there.
Grandparents?
My dad's parents came up to live with us for a while. Well, they lived in the house with us, but they came up from Alabama.
What was that like?
It was good. It was good. I really enjoyed them and everybody in the house. And eventually, they moved out, got their own place. My aunt moved, and my cousin, he was in college, so he would come home during the summer. And he eventually left and moved to Detroit. But it was good because my parents worked, so my grandparents pretty much, took care of us, during the day when they were gone to work, And sometimes we always enjoyed when my mother came home because my grandparents was tough.
What made your grandparents so tough?
They was just, they weren't, my grandfather could be a fun guy, but sometimes it was tough when my grandmother was around because she was one of them really, she didn't have a sense of humor. I never thought that she had a sense of humor. It was difficult to have fun around her because she was always so serious.
Serious or strict?
She was strict and she was serious in a manner that she always thought and she was right that, you know, you should use your time to the best of your ability. So she always wanted to teach you how to sew. She was very crafty. So she wanted to teach you how to create things, always wanted you doing something with your hands or something. I played piano, so she always wanted me to practice piano. And, you know, it was like you just couldn't have a free moment.
What were your grandparents' trades?
My grandfather was a municipal worker. I think he worked for the sanitation department in Alabama, but he had retired by the time he came up here. And then my grandmother, she just did whatever. She was the hustler.
Okay. But was there a particular reason for your grandparents to move up?
Well, you know, I asked my grandfather that years later after my grandmother had passed, and I asked him, why did he come to Cleveland? And he said, he had mentioned something, and he said if it was up to him, he would have stayed in Alabama. I said, well, why'd you come to Cleveland? He said, because my grandmother, she just always wanted to come to Cleveland. And she wanted to be up here because she had two sons here at the time, and her daughter was down there with her. And she was one who wanted to get out of Alabama, because I think her sister hadn't come up here yet, hadn't gone to Buffalo yet. So he said she wanted to come to Cleveland.
So your father, your grandfather's take on Jim Crow was a little different.
Yeah, you know, he didn't talk about it a whole lot, like my dad did. You know, he was in the army in World War I. He was in France, and he did talk about how well he was treated when he was in France before he had to come back here. But he really didn't get a narrative like my dad did.
So your grandfather and your father were military guys?
Mm-hmm.
What branch?
Army.
Mm-hmm. Your father ever talk a lot about the military?
Yeah, he talks about the military. He was, I guess, what did he do? He was in the tank brigade, the tank, whatever they call it. They handled the tanks. So he did talk about it. Matter of fact, I was rearranging some stuff at his house this summer, and I found a lot of old stuff from my grandfather's military days and his military days that I kind of set aside and put they were in a book.
So like a military family, or like father, like son?
Yep, and one of my brothers went to the military too. And he had two brothers that went to the military.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, family, you have your grandparents here, and they're strict, but they're raising you
Mm-hmm.
and your brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the difference, Cleveland and the West Side, more black people in East Cleveland?
In East Cleveland, there were more black folks here, there were more kids. And then, you know, we started school here because I wasn't in school over there. So I started school over at Superior School. But the main thing was it was just a lot more people, you know, in East Cleveland, you know, because on the west side, you know, like our street was small and I was young, so I didn't get out, you know, as much. I played with the kids next door with my dog Joyce, and that was about it. And then the houses were older on this side. They were bigger because we stayed in a small, you know, those new track houses that they had built, and they're small. I think they were like 2-bedroom houses, but they were new. It was newer over there, you know.
But as far as kids go,
Mm-hmm.
you played with the kids. You probably couldn't ascertain any impartial treatment or any negative.
No, not really. They were black kids that lived next door to me, and at that time I was too young to know. And I don't recall interacting with any of the white kids over there at all, because I was real young. So if I was playing with somebody, it was right next door. It was in my house. You know.
East Cleveland and Superior Elementary.
Yes.
What was that like?
That was great. Yeah. A lot of the friendships I have to this day are from people that I met at Superior Elementary School.
Walker School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had my first black teacher at Superior Elementary School, Miss Benson, one of the few black teachers in the school at the time. And she was an experienced one we still talk about.
How about the rest of your schooling? That's elementary.
I attended Kirk and Shaw High. Cardinals.
What year did you graduate from Shaw?
77.
From Superior to Shaw in 77, how had the student body changed?
Racially, the student body changed. It was changing a lot, you know, from its beginning in elementary school. We had white kids in our class, but you know, as we went on, there were fewer and fewer. There were a few white folks when I got to Shaw, but most of them were older than me. By the time I graduated, we probably had 2 in the class. But in terms of academics, once we got to Kirk, we always seemed to be the group that got experimented on, you know, with these new teaching concepts, you know. So it was like we start Kirk, and then they come up with this new system of putting us in these teams, you know, 4 classrooms to a team, and those are they called them units, and you went through with that unit. And then we got to Shaw, and they came up with another dream, and they enacted that on us. And so we always seemed to be the guinea pig class.
Race relations in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
How did that, thinking back, how was that from elementary straight through high school?
Now, in elementary school, it was good. I mean, we never had, I don't recall any conflicts at all in terms of being conscious of race in elementary school. I think I was conscious of race because I was following the news a lot, and I had a dad that always talked about it. So I was aware of it, but in school per se, probably having Miss Benson as a teacher who really talked about having black pride and stuff like that, and you know, but in terms of it, and I think the school, in terms of the migration of the white folks out, by the time I got to the 6th grade, we didn't have any whites in our class anymore. Most of them started with me in kindergarten and 1st grade, and by the time we got to 5th, 6th grade, they were all gone pretty much. I remember the riots, the Glenville riots. I remember, because I lived right at the bridge. I was the last house before you went under the bridge. And I remember being up in my room that night, I think it was in July, and I remember seeing this real bright red, yellow glow, you know, as I looked across the tracks. And at first I didn't know what it was, and then I went downstairs, and then we see the Jeeps coming up the street to Euclid, because they went up the street to block Euclid off, to block anybody from coming up Superior to Euclid, keeping folks out of East Cleveland. So they, so that's when, you know, I realized that something was going on, you know. And the next morning, that's when we got the news, you know, that looked at the news and went down Superior and it was all burnt, you know.
So you remember the
Mm-hmm.
uprising?
Yeah, the Glen. Well, actually, I guess that extended from the Glenville.
Glenville, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's 60,
That would have been 68.
68.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back just briefly.
Mm-hmm.
West side, east side of Cleveland, west side of Cleveland, East Cleveland. How did that happen?
You know what? I don't know why they chose to move on the east side. I remember my dad. You know, in retrospect, we talk about you know, real estate and housing discrimination. I know he was talking about how it opened up in East Cleveland because whites started moving out, so houses were really available in East Cleveland for blacks to purchase at that time because a lot of the other areas had restrictive covenants that were still being followed. So you know you couldn't get into Cleveland Heights, you couldn't get into Euclid. You know there are a lot of areas you couldn't get into. Even some neighborhoods in Cleveland you couldn't get into because they had these restrictive covenants, and then they passed the laws about the signage and all that stuff. But I remember him talking about how East Cleveland basically was one of the few places where blacks could purchase homes because people were really leaving, you know, so the houses were available and everybody else had closed everything off. So that's, you know, why you got a large concentration of blacks at that time in terms of moving into the suburbs in East Cleveland.
Can you remember back when you first moved to Collier, how many blacks were on your street?
It was when we first moved over there, it was practically all black except for probably two houses on my side of the bridge. Now, on the other side of the bridge, I don't know. Because I remember Mr. Bill and his wife, and I want to say it was one more, but I think they moved. I didn't know them. There was another house on the street, across the street, next to Mr. Bill, but I think they moved shortly after we moved in. I didn't know them, but Mr. Bill stayed there for quite some time. Because I
So
think
65 was primarily black at that time.
yeah, especially on that side close to Superior.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you? I know you were young.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remember anything else about the community, shops, stores?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
A
What was
very,
the community like?
very vibrant business community on Superior, from Lakeview all the way up to Euclid. Euclid, you had small mom and pop stores on Euclid from Avondale. You didn't have much from Superior to Lakeview. It was a couple, like two mom and pop stores on our side of the street, and then across the street they opened that Red Barn over there. It was like the first restaurant other than the McDonald's. That McDonald's was the only fast food restaurant. Then they opened that Red Barn there at Wadena, and the guy owned that gas station. There used to be a Standard Oil across the street, but he never sold gas there. He opened it up as a little store where we used to go get our penny candy, right? And nickel Hershey bars. Yeah.
That's good because the next question is, can you think back to your earliest memories of East Cleveland and tell me what life was like then? Is there anything else you think of?
It was a pleasant life. I mean, we had you know, there were lots of kids, a lot of families, a lot of large families that lived in East Cleveland. You know, you could walk to and from the store. The shopping center was very vibrant. You know, we used to go up there all the time. They had the 10-cent store, they had the drugstore up there, they had the grocery store up there, and the jitneys up there, because that's how my mother used to get her groceries. We'd go up there and get the bride back home with the jitney. And it was just, I went to the dentist there. Superior Savings was over there. That's where we opened our bank accounts at when we was little. We opened them up with $2, and every time we got a piece of change, we'd go put it in the bank.
What shopping center?
Superior, the Superior Euclid Shopping Center.
The Forest Hill Shopping Center?
Yeah, Forest Hill Shopping Center.
Okay. And you would walk there?
Yeah, we would walk up there all the time and get groceries, and yeah, and shop up there. And I go up there. That's where I used to do my Christmas shopping, up there at the shopping center. We didn't go to Severance or anything like that. We went up to the Superior, up to the Forest Hill Shopping Center.
What did you do for recreation?
Recreation, we had Forest Hill Park. We did a lot of stuff at Forest Hill Park, a lot of stuff at the school, because we had a playground at the school then. And but a lot of stuff at Forest Hill. He used to know every inch of that park.
Family or just his kids?
Both. You know, we would get a gang of kids together and head up to the park. We might go up there in the morning. We pack us some sandwiches, and we might go up there in the morning, and we'd stay up there like all day, and then come back home.
and never any problem with that?
Never a problem, never a care.
I mean, with anything happening to kids, and your parents weren't like...
No, they weren't. As long as you was back before nightfall, before the street lights came on, you was okay. You know, but for the most part, it wasn't nothing to let your kids go to the park or go up to the school playground or go to the store, or, you know.
It was friendly like that.
It was friendly like that. And I remember, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. Even when we used to go to school in the morning, they used to have a policeman crossing the kids at Superior, because we used to have to go down Euclid and cross Superior to go to school. And they had a policeman. Oh my gosh, we used to know his name, because we used to say hi to Mr. So-and-so every morning. We used to call him by his first name. And we say, Mr. Frank or whatever. And they had the same policeman out there every morning, crossing us across the street, taking us across the street. You know. Oh, I forgot to mention the car dealership. We had Spitzer Ford here.
Where was that?
That was right across from your place, right across from the solar building.
Where Popeyes...
Right where Popeyes and the developmental center is. Used to be a new car lot. They sold new cars there.
Okay. So you say you didn't have to go to Severance or anything for your Christmas shopping?
No.
Like movies and...
Now, I was not one, my parents was not one to take us to the movies or let us go to the movies and stuff, but everybody I know used to go to the, not the Hippodrome, but the Commodore. And I guess there used to be another theater here at one time. I can't remember, but I think there used to be 2 theaters, but I know the Commodore was one of them because it was on Hayden. And there was another one, I can't think of where it was.
What would be some of your fondest memories of East Cleveland?
Probably the people. I mean, East Cleveland was tight. I mean, it was tight. I mean, everybody here knew everybody, and we were very fortunate in that we went to school with the same people from elementary school all the way through high school. So a lot of those people I mean, they're as close to me as brothers and sisters, and that's how we all are like that, sort of. But mainly the people. You know, even through the changes, even to this day, we all still get together. We all, you know, around that whole Shaw moniker, that whole East Cleveland thing, we still get together around that.
Neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
What ways has the city changed over time?
Other than its physical appearance, which mainly is due to business leaving, the tax base, you know, people moving, taking their wealth elsewhere, moving to other areas. You have a more transient population, which I think is true of most places now. People, and I think that's just a historical trend. The longevity of residency is not there because the jobs, people move jobs, and then it's just a fast-paced society, you know. People don't put down roots anymore like they used to for a lot of reasons, I think. Drugs became a lot more prevalent. Very debilitating drugs. I think the type of drugs make a difference too.
Any other things you think contributed? I mean, those were good. And any other things you think contributed to the change in East Cleveland?
Change in leadership, and the change in people's ability to hold leadership accountable. I think that also had a lot to do with it. I think at one time you had to meet some level of qualification to run for office, and now it's like, hey, as long as I can tell a good story and, you know, win them over with my personality, I got a good shot of getting elected, no matter what I know. And I think that's prevalent not only in East Cleveland, but a lot of places. But it makes a big difference when the majority of your governance is like that. And then I think people get busy with other things. You know, even though our parents worked, a lot of times our parents, you know, you had parents who, at least one parent, or like you had grandparents, you had extended families that took care of kids and families, you know, and I think that changed a lot too. So I think that changed. I think the value of education helped change the town. I mean, Shaw, and you can still, I mean, it still is, you can still get a lot out of that school if you go there, if you attend. I always say you got to be in the building to get something, no matter what kind of school it is. But I think there's a diminishing of the value of what people have here.
And I didn't mean to overlook this question on your bio sketch. Are you married?
No.
Never married?
Mm-mm.
Children?
No.
And the reason I thought of that, you said something that's true for me, and you said it's true for you, and that is, we're fortunate to grow up, come through school, and still got the same friends that we started out in elementary.
Mm-hmm.
You think that happens today?
No, not at all.
What
You know,
do you think changed that?
I think because you have, I think back then this community, first of all, a lot of these people who moved here were first generation out of Jim Crow. You know, a lot of so it was like people really had, were enthusiastic about the future. And they wanted, and they knew that, first of all, they knew education was the great equalizer. So they knew that at a, you know, it was just expected. You're gonna go to school, you're gonna get an education, you know, whether you go to college or not, because back then you didn't have to go to college to make a decent buck, but you had to finish high school, you know. And I just think, and it's a unique thing because even people in Cleveland, even though they go to school in Cleveland, they may not have, when they get to high school, they're getting people from all over town. So they don't really have that cohesiveness like we do. And I think because this was like a single community, I guess I can't really explain it. That's just my guess. Because I really thought everybody had the same experiences until I talked to people and they're like, what is it with you shy people? Y'all still, you know, you still get together with people who went to high school with? And it's like, yeah, don't you?
We're gonna have to pause here for a second. Go ahead, pause it. No, we're good now. With that, I wanna stay on that a little bit because
Oh, okay.
I get that all the time.
Did you go to Shaw?
I went to Mayfair.
Oh, okay.
Right? And the
Okay.
people, not only are we still friends, most of us till our late 20s still stayed on the same street.
Oh, okay.
So we
Okay.
were just that. We still hang out,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So today, the kids today, I'm trying to understand how come they wouldn't necessarily have that benefit of a friendship.
Mm.
What is so different about family, the city, the school, the neighborhood?
You know, I really think a lot of it is they're transient, number one, and then they are so into this whole electronic communication thing. You know, they don't really get to know each other. They think they do. They really think they have relationships through texting and email. You know, I tell my niece this all the time. I said, it's going to be interesting to see when you guys, 20, 30 years from now, how you guys really interact with each other. You know, what is this going to manifest to? Because they don't talk. Like I always tell her, I said, don't text me, pick up a phone and call me. And she says, well, it's just easier to just a text, and I get my point across, and I don't have to get into any extraneous conversations, and I can just move on, you know. But I said, you know, you really don't develop relationships like that. You know, you got to go and meet people, talk to people, do things with people, you know. But it's, I don't understand it either. And I think, and one of the things we try to do with the Alumni Association, which is why we have this big weekend, is to try to bring that back, to try to let young people see, you know, the camaraderie that we have as alumni and people who live in East Cleveland, you know, because people bring their kids and, you know, it's all of you introducing your kids, you introducing your kids to their kids, you know. And it's just a effort to just try to bring that back, try to bring that pride back into, with people and help them to see, hey, this is how you do, this is what 20 years from now, this is what is going to really sustain you. You know, these relationships that you develop over the years. You know, I didn't realize how unique it was and how great it was until you start talking to other people. And they just find it so strange. And I find it strange that they think it's strange.
My nephew doesn't know what hide and seek is.
Oh, really? They've never played hide and seek.
I said, y'all got too many computer games.
That's it. They don't get out.
Yeah.
They don't get out.
We had to create entertainment.
Yeah. You know, I worked in Huff for a few years, and I used to work with kids. And one of the things that I found from the time that I started working there to the time that I had quit was that the kids were getting less and less creative about things to do. When I first got there, those kids, you could come in there, put them in a room, and they would come up with all kinds of stuff to do. So you try to make it happen, you know. You know, they want to start their own little business called the Small Jobs Program. I said, okay, we'll do that. I even got it, you know, so I mean, they could come up with things, they could do programs, they could come up with the program, the songs, and put everything on. You just give them a stage, you know. Then it just seemed as if things just got a little more depressing. Next thing I know, kids coming in, they don't want to think about the future because I'm gonna be dead by 25. And I think it's the language we put out there too. When you say, you know, why don't these kids have that kind of camaraderie and pride? And I think probably beginning in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, the messages that we send. You know, when we were growing up, it was a message of hope. It was a message of pride. You know, when you leave this house, you represent this family. Don't shame me out there, you know. And you had that in your mind. But then the messages in the 90s got to be, you know, you're a black kid, you're not gonna have longevity in life, you're gonna drop out of school, you're not as smart as other kids, you're not prepared, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know, and I mean, we don't realize kids internalize that stuff. And they do.
Where that comes from?
I think it's media. I think in some ways it's by design, but I think but we buy into it. You know, because it's a whole cottage industry of black folks that make a living going around talking about just that.
How is that different from when we were growing up?
Because I think the message was different. I don't think first of all, we weren't overexposed to media, I don't think. And then I think our parents were more prideful, you know, and I think they insulated us from things like racism, failure, you know, that kind of thing. It was like you were expected to achieve. You had expectations. And I think what we taught kids was, yeah, you should strive for this, but the likelihood is that you won't get there. I think that's the message that we send. Which is I just always say I would never take a kid of mine to some of these programs where they sit there and they talk about that all day. And they think they're imparting some knowledge, but they really bashing a kid's spirit. Because I know it affects us on the job and everything else. When I first started working, I used to think, I was like, okay, they real smart. I got to figure out how to get smart as they do until I figured it out. That I was just as smart. They was just perpetrating and had me fooled.
We want to get there. After 77, you leave Shaw.
I went to Cincinnati, to the University of Cincinnati.
And what did you study?
Political science.
Any particular reason?
Just a political animal. It was the first. For years, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I am a political animal at heart.
And when did this happen?
What's that?
You became a political.
Oh, early in elementary school, probably. Yeah.
Good. How was Cincinnati different from East Cleveland?
Oh, that's where I got my first blast of racism, my first blast in the face, so to speak. When I went to Cincinnati, that was the first year that Cincinnati became a state school. Before then, they were a private school. That was 77. And becoming a state school afforded them a lot of funding opportunities from the federal government, which meant they had diversity requirements that they had to ascertain. So that year was the first year that a large number of blacks attended the University of Cincinnati. And it was obvious that they weren't quite ready for us. And they tried to keep us out of the 4-year institutions by putting us into the 2-year institution, and putting us in remedial, trying to put us in remedial English and math courses. And I remember I was fortunate in that the day I was supposed to go down and take the test that was supposed to determine which English and math classes you got put into, my dad didn't. My dad was late, so I didn't get to go. And then when he got there, I locked the keys in the trunk. So it was really fate that said I wasn't supposed to go take the test, and I ended up in the regular math class and English class, the regular English class, because I didn't take math, but the regular English class, because I didn't take the test. But a lot of people, so what they did was they put you in the 2-year course, and a lot of people stayed in the 2-year course, and then they had to transfer over to the 4-year college, which meant that extended their stay somewhat. But by that time, I guess the plan was that you'd probably drop out anyway, and they'd already had the money, and they'd meet their requirements, so they'd get their federal money. But I was fortunate in meeting some folks when I got down there that was a part of the United Black Association that showed me the tricks of the trade of how to maneuver and get over to the 4-year college with advanced standing. And that's what I did.
Okay. And that was your first dose of racism.
And that was my first dose of racism.
It sounded almost like I don't want to say structural, but institutional, because it was.
Oh, yeah.
How about the students, the student body?
The student body, of course, predominantly white student body. I had 3 white roommates, one from West Virginia, one from Cincinnati, and one from Toledo. Very nice girls. Didn't have any problems with my roommates at all. There were things that happened around campus. They had a Martin Luther King trash party one year that sent us all, we ended up protesting Martin Luther King weekend. What they did was they sent out these invitations that they posted all over the school, and it said Martin Luther King trash party, and they had certain things you had to have to get in the door. Your father, if you know him, your welfare card, all kinds of demeaning, stereotypical things that they put on this list. And so it was the SAEs that gave the party, which is the biggest, Sigma Alpha Ellipsi, the biggest fraternity in the country, and richest fraternity in the country. And you ever heard that commercial, SAEs love Arby's? Well, that was the SAEs. And so we ended up protesting, and Ken Blackwell was the mayor then. And we had this protest on campus, and Ken Blackwell came up there and told us that we was being too sensitive and that we was making a big deal out of just a college prank.
Ken Blackwell, that was the...
Ken Blackwell that wanted to be governor of this fine state.
Wow, what was he before?
He worked for, he worked for Reagan. What position did he have with Reagan? Yeah, he was the Secretary of State, and he served as treasurer. And he was appointed to a couple cabinet positions, not cabinet positions, but like staff positions in Washington.
How were the teachers so far as racism?
The teachers, well, I tell you one experience I had. I was taking I wanted to do political science and foreign affairs. So I was taking these foreign affairs courses, but in the political science department, they did not have an African politics course. So I went to the African American Studies department, and I was taking my African politics courses, not African history, African politics. Now they had, I did take Middle Eastern politics, even though everybody forgets that Northern Africa is in Africa, But I took the Middle Eastern, I took China, I took everything. But when I got to African, they didn't have anything other than Middle Eastern politics. So I had petitioned the political science department to let me use the African politics course as credit towards my political science degree because they had no courses. And I was told that African American Studies is not a legitimate course of study.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, awful. Because at that time, I couldn't give a mature response.
Oh, I want to hear this.
Well, I couldn't, so I ended up going off on the lady, instead of, really setting up my rationale and arguing my point, But yeah, that's what she told me.
So what happened?
Well, I did not get the credit for, towards my degree, but I did take the African. As a matter of fact, I had a couple good experiences. I took the African politics course, and then I also was able to do a independent study out of the African American Studies department. Not being a major over there, they let me do that. But I incorporated in my international studies part of my degree, but they didn't give me credit for it.
How did your time down there end?
It was good. It was good. I graduated and stayed down there for a while. The job it was it was the Reagan recession, so it was tough. Down there it was real tough in terms of finding a job. I worked a few little jobs here and there, and then I decided, hey, I'm sick of Cincinnati. I got to come back home.
So you came back to?
Came back to Cleveland, and I actually came back to Cleveland Heights because we were living in Cleveland Heights at the time I graduated high school. But I lived in Cleveland Heights, but I lived in East Cleveland School District. So I was living there when I graduated high school. So I came back to my parents' house in Cleveland Heights. Mm-hmm.
Came back to East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And work-wise?
That's when I started working on Huff. And I worked down there for a while.
Okay. At where?
It was the Bell Center, a part of the NCA, Neighborhood Centers Association. At that time, I think they had about 10 agencies that they sponsored.
And what did you do there?
I was a community organizer and youth coordinator.
In what community?
Huff. We were on Huff. I worked all the way down to 55th. 55th, Ansel to 55th.
How was that experience?
It was good. It was good. It was my first job. I didn't know if I would like it. A friend of mine she was working for one of the other centers, and she recommended me to the guy over there who was the head coordinator. And I went over there, and it was good. I enjoy working with the kids. I enjoy working out in the community. At that time, it was one of I learned a lot about politics working over there. Fannie Lewis was the council person over there at the time, and she was trying to make things happen, and it was a good experience. I did work over at Martin Luther King High School, at Wilson Junior High, which was like night and day, but it was good. It was good.
And are you still with the neighborhood association?
No. Now I'm with Housing and Urban Development.
Okay. And what do you do for HUD?
I'm a housing specialist, so to speak.
How long you been doing that?
Since I've been there since 2004, but I started as an auditor, and I did that for about 6 years. And then I went into multifamily housing, and now I'm in public housing.
Okay. And you're a housing specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now that we've covered a lot of that, I want to come back to my script here.
Mm-hmm.
How has racism impacted you personally, and how has it impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Personally. Well, I think when I first started working in mixed environments, racially diverse environments, the one thing that, hit me is that, all the white people made more money than the black people. And there were certain jobs that, blacks just were not even considered for, I mean, and it was that blatant, and nobody seemed nobody seemed to want to talk about it much. It was like, that's the way it is, and people would apply for the jobs and they wouldn't get selected, and everybody knew it was, in many cases, it was because the jobs that they allowed black people to have were not the jobs that they generally would promote to those higher positions. So those jobs tended to have less value. And so I became a union rep, and we started kind of talking about these things and and then it was certain jobs where there were just not going to be any promotion potential. So we would try to get these sort of like upward bound programs put in so that people would at least have an opportunity to be able to ascertain positions that were going to be mobile. Because those jobs that would give you the skills, those lower level jobs that would give you the skills and backgrounds to qualify, that's where you needed to be. And just noticing just how things go and how men take care of men. How the old boys take care of each other, no matter what.
Can you tell us more about the union rep? What company or what industry?
I worked for IRS for a while, and we had a union called National Treasury Employees Union, probably the best federal union. Small, but it's the best. I became a union steward, but my best job there was as a legislative coordinator. And then I also was a vice president at one time. I filed grievances, negotiated agreements, and also did legislative work in terms of lobbying our issues with the local congressional delegation, and also informing and getting our people here active in lobbying for those issues.
And how did that work out?
It worked out great. I think one of the accomplishment I'm most proud of is the effort that went behind reforming the Hatch Act. And if you're familiar with the Hatch Act for years prevented federal employees from being involved in politics. Because way back when, somewhere around Lincoln's time, there was a lot of corruption in the federal ranks, rank and file federal ranks. So that's when they created the civil service, what was the beginnings of the civil service. And they came up with all these rules. And one of the rules was to keep federal employees out of politics in order to preserve the integrity of the federal system. In other words, people would curry favor to get services from the government, you know, by bribing and everything else. Well, once they took, you know, created a standard, you know, we was like Mexico before. They like to talk about Mexico in ethics. We used to be Mexico too. But so once they created these standards, the Hatch Act was part of that. And for years, federal employees could not be involved in the process. And when the process basically rules everything that they do, from what benefits they get, to whether they'll have a job or not, whether they'll get raises or not, and whatnot. And you know, you could have no part in that. You couldn't work for campaigns, whether it was locally or nationally. You couldn't work for campaigns or anything. So around, I guess it was in the early 90s, there was an effort to reform the Hatch Act to permit federal employees to be involved in partisan politics. And it was a long fought battle, and fortunately, you know, we were able to get it through and pass. You know, and there are still some restrictions, but you know, I can work for the candidate of my choice. I can donate money. I can't raise money, but I can donate money. You know, and now you got millions of federal employees now who can get involved in the process.
And you were instrumental in making that happen.
I was just a pig in the cog. You know, it was a big union effort, and we went to DC every year. We lobbied that for about 5 or 6 years before we got it. But I was just a pig in the pond, you know.
Okay. Back to racism and its impact on you personally and the impact on the city of East Cleveland.
City of East Cleveland, racism. The fact that East Cleveland pretty much became the whooping boy for every municipality around here, including the Plain Dealer and various news stations in this town. And I think some of that had to do with, you know, one thing about racism, you know, if you teach it and you acculturate it in the body so well, you make people look outside of their own issues. So the newspapers will always run negative stories on East Cleveland. The news stations will always run negative stories on East Cleveland. So the people in Cleveland Heights, Euclid, the Westlake, and everybody else will feel great because at least we're not East Cleveland, you know. It kept resources out of East Cleveland because of the reputation, you know, and in many ways, and reputation was always unfair. You know, I mean, you know, the denigration that East Cleveland took in the press and in the media fueled a lot of it, and it was strictly racism. Because even Cleveland used to get it bad back then. You know, they didn't report things, and they didn't report corruption in the suburbs. like they reported corruption, if there was any, you know, when it happened here in East Cleveland or when it happened in Cleveland. It was always a big deal. They didn't talk about funky contract moves in the suburbs like they did scrutinize Cleveland and East Cleveland, you know. So, and I think a lot of that was race-based. You know, it was easy to do. And that's when I stopped supporting the plain dealers, biggest sponsors. I always like to give myself credit for putting them out of business. Higbee's and May Company. but no, but they did a great disservice to this community. And the only thing I will ever give Brewer credit for is that when he became mayor, he kind of stopped a lot of that because he was willing to push back on the media to some degree. And some of the negative some of the negative story, a lot of those negative stories stopped. And even the plain dealers started writing, you know, some more positive or more objective stories about East Cleveland even during that time. And it's gotten better since then, because I think, but yeah, racism affected this town. And then around this town, I mean, you were surrounded by Euclid and Cleveland and Cleveland Heights. And like last summer, when they had the problems in Cleveland Heights at their festival, and they blamed East Cleveland. They don't know where those kids came from, but they said it was East Cleveland kids. You know, they just throwed it on East Cleveland, and then they went so overboard. They canceled. It was the year before. They canceled their festivals this year. Well, we have a festival in this city every year that the Alumni Association that's 10 times larger than anything that they have up there on Lee Road. And we have not had a problem in 7 years. You know, but nobody wants to talk about that. You know, all we got to do is keep Cleveland cops out of town. We'll be all right.
You know, I really like these two questions. And they're so close as far as conversation, and they can overlap a lot. And you've touched on it a great deal. This next question, how has inequality impacted you personally? How has it impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Me personally. Well, I mean, there are probably many subtle ways that I don't understand how it's impacted me, but in terms of just, you know, when I left here and went to school, you know, you get the sense of people think you're second rate, you know, the whole thing about affirmative action. Oh, you hear on affirmative action, that whole thing. And, you know, I had a Spanish teacher at Shaw one time who used to tell us, she said, you know, people will tell you that you aren't good enough, you're not good as. She said, but I put my students up against Solon, Shaker Heights. She told us that one time. And I didn't really think about that until I got to school and I saw how people treated me, you know, or when you say something that they think is smart, something they think you're not supposed to know, you know, they give you this look, or they'll say, how you know that? You know, I read the same book you read, you know? You know, but just that kind of stuff. I mean, it's on the job, you know, it's on the job all the time.
You touched on it, I think, in two ways. You said that Cincinnati didn't have the classes you needed, did that impact your graduation at all?
No, it didn't impact my graduation. It just impacted what I wanted to do. I could have accelerated. Had I gotten those classes, I could have been out of there earlier. That is true. Yeah, I could have been out of there. Would have cost me less money. Yeah.
How about when you were a union rep, and you said that you were dealing with a lot of jobs where they wouldn't even put minorities in that track to move up. How do you think that impacted you personally and other people at that company at the time?
I think that did impact. I think race played some part of it, but I don't think I gave it all over to race because I was a union rep. So I kind of figured that might have played more into it. But I was in one of those jobs that they didn't consider worthy enough, to move to one of those other jobs, And what happened eventually after I left, a lot of they started hiring a lot of blacks in those agent positions and stuff in numbers that wasn't dreamed of. So the only thing I could think of is somebody filed a lawsuit, which is usually how it happens. That's usually how it happens. And but eventually it did happen, but it was long after I had left.
Anywhere else along the line you think inequality may have presented different challenges for you, maybe a stumbling block or?
Yeah, I could probably when I was in Columbus, I had gone to Columbus and started auditing for HUD, and that was a strictly old boys network. I was only black female in the office, only black person in the office for a while. Then they hired a black guy, and they kind of had a mission to get rid of us. Now, we probably was there as a result of a lawsuit or something. but it was, first of all, we traveled all the time, and you run into it when you travel because there's just something about airports that makes everybody superior, It's just something about being tall, white, and wearing a suit that just gets you at the front of the line. And you better not be in the premier line. They're going to tell you, oh, this is the premier line. You sure you should be over here? I mean, they just outright, well, to say that to you. And it's like, I'm in the right line. You've had that happen. They do it all the time. I mean, and it's regular. I've had been standing at the front of the line, and the white guy comes up in the suit, and the person at the desk will wave him over in front of me, as if his stuff is more important. I can wait. I had that happen in D.C. one time. Those kinds of things, and it just raises your blood pressure a bit. Those kinds of things are mostly what I've experienced,
Pause and then come right back. We're talking about racism, inequality, and how it's impacted you personally, and then we're going to go into the city of East Cleveland. I know earlier you said you first experienced it going to Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And then how did your attitude or personality or the way you handled it, how did that change? How has it changed now from, say, then?
I think, being older and a little more mature, but I think the main thing that's changed is I understand it better. I have a better sense of who I am and a lot more confident in my own abilities. And, you know, once I got out of this thing of thinking that, you know, they had these big brains and stuff, you know, I mean, and really, I did go in thinking, you know, oh, they real smart. I'm gonna have to really show myself because they real smart, you know. But once I realized that was all fake, it was okay with me. But I think I deal with it, and I think having a real sense of who you are and your own abilities is the main thing that gets you, that got me by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Inequality and its impact on the city of East Cleveland.
Inequality in terms of resources, in terms of recognition. I think in some ways the image is changing. I think the majority has become a little more enlightened. Race-wise, they got a long way to go. I think we deal with it more overtly than they do, you know, because a lot of them don't recognize, they don't overtly recognize their own participation in it. But I think they are slowly coming to terms with that, and I think it's mainly the young people are not buying into the old ways. So I think it's changing. Because I think that old guard did such damage to East Cleveland, you know, image-wise, you know, through their power to be able to portray you in the media and stuff like that, that you had people who thought this place was absolutely nothing, that was unworthy of anything. And now you got people trying to knock down the door, trying to get in here. You know, but I think this city, I mean, this when I say city, because I always refer to all of this as Cleveland, no matter if you anywhere in Cuyahoga County, you in Cleveland, you know. But this city is real unique in terms of its segregation and its racism, and the battle that we've had to wage to get Carl Stokes elected, to deal with all these kind of race things. One thing about Cincinnati is people used to say you was from Cleveland. Boy, people would back up. You got a lot of respect, especially from black folks, because they always saw us as fighters. As we had the first black mayor, and I didn't realize the first black mayor, the first black baseball manager. First, one of the first black players, I mean, after Jackie Robinson was here in Cleveland. So, I mean, and we had people in political office. We had council people. We had voices, you know, real fiery voices. We had Harlell Jones. We had Ahmed Evans. We had people that fought back, you know, and people know that about the city. So you go down there and you say you're from Cleveland, they be like backing up. Ooh, y'all gangster up there. Be like, what you talking about? You know, but this is the image that they have, because they didn't have that down there. You know, they had a couple tokens and that was it. You know, but that's somebody's ghost and come in the room. Welcome.
Grennetta, can you recollect a memory or an instant when the community fought for something?
East Cleveland? You know what? I can't. The most vivid thing that comes to my mind is when just before I started Kirk, they used to wear uniforms. And the students protested because they didn't want to wear those middies anymore. They used to wear the skirts and the midi blouses, and they didn't want to wear the middies anymore, and they protested that. Then the kids tried to protest at Shaw, because I was in about the 7th grade then. They wanted to smoke in the lounge. Oh, of course they didn't get the smoke in the lounge, but they staged this big walkout at Shaw. It was like, it had to be like 1970 or something like that. And but I remember that, because people on the street, their brothers and sisters was in it. And I was like, I can't believe they trying to smoke at school. But in terms of community issues, I'm gonna be honest, I can't think of any. I know when I was out of town, when they went to the mayoral form of government, I do remember that. I remember grabbing a plain dealer and checking that out, because I was following that in the plain dealer when I was out of town. And because that was after the judge got arrested and convicted, and a couple other, I think a few of the commissioners had gotten indicted, and then there was a community move to change the form of government. They thought it would be a little more representative to have wards and council people representing specific wards.
You remember the uniform and the smoking, but you didn't participate?
No, I didn't. I wasn't trying to smoke at school. I was in the 7th grade. I think I was going to the 7th grade then.
Anything else happened in the community? You remember the community stood up for it?
Not that it didn't happen, but I just cannot recall. I remember they used to pass school levies here every other year. And I remember when we were in school, every fall, they would make signs, and they would have us march down the street in a parade, march down Euclid in the parade to get these school levies passed. That's why we had such high taxes in East Cleveland. I don't think East Cleveland has ever turned down a school levy.
How about the hospital or the post office?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Most people mention those.
You know what? I was thinking back in the past. I should have been thinking more recent. This is true. The hospital, yes, great effort.
Okay. How have surrounding institutions and cities impacted East Cleveland?
I don't think they want to work with East Cleveland. I don't get that impression that they want to work with the city. I think they go out of their way to try to exclude East Cleveland and its residents. Cleveland Heights being an example of when they encroached on the park up there. Despite concerns from East Cleveland and its residents when they built the center, they built the center up there, and they allow every other municipality to participate in it, University Heights, Euclid Heights, but in the beginning, but they didn't allow East Cleveland. In the beginning, they actually specified the suburbs that could take part there. Now I think they have a price for non-residents, period. Money getting tight.
That's terrible. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to stay here for a second, but then I want to go back. So, an institution you mentioned earlier, could we call the plain dealer and the media an institution?
Plain dealer to what? I'm sorry.
And the media.
Oh yeah.
TV,
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sorry, your question is?
How have they impacted East Cleveland?
Oh, I think they've in the last few years, they've been better than they were, say before 2008. I think they did the city a great disservice, Cleveland and East Cleveland, but East Cleveland even more, because they always sought to do negative stories on East Cleveland. You know, they never sought out to do any positive stories in East Cleveland. And I don't know if you remember this or recall this. There was a time from like 1980 probably to about 99 where the media seemed to really revel in doing a lot of reporting on what they considered inner city vices, or I'm just trying to come up with a word, like the drug epidemic and the crime epidemic that went along with that, and they seem to be engrossed with doing those stories all over the country in black neighborhoods, and it seemed like that's the only thing you would see when it came to talking about, urban areas. They talk about drugs, or they talk about whether it was an event or whether it was just a general. Seemed like those are the only stories they were interested in.
What type of impact do you think that had on the city?
Oh, I think it had a great impact because it created an image out there. I mean, who wants to do business? And who wants to do business with a city full of the way they depicted it, raving lunatics that nobody can control? I'm likely just to stick my head over the border and get it shot off. I mean, really, people would have these things. I tell people I come to East Cleveland, I live in East Cleveland, or, I got a meeting in East Cleveland. Oh, you go to East Cleveland? Yeah, every day I'm in East Cleveland. I mean, what is the deal? I mean, they literally think you crawling around the floor in your house dodging bullets every night. I mean, that's basically the image that some people have of this city. And I've been here, 30, 40 years, and up until last year, my dad's house gets broken into. Been here all this time, never had a problem, But a lot of that got to do with the recent issues of black. You asked me, how has racism impacted East Cleveland? This whole mortgage thing, the whole predatory lending thing, it ruined this city. What we had, we lost as a result. And now, the dirty secret that ain't been told yet is these banks and these insurance companies redlining East Cleveland, doing whatever they can to cancel mortgages and insurance, on people. They're going about it very slyly, and that's the one thing we're gonna need to get Nina Turner involved in. Because these insurance companies now are going around doing these inspections that they've never done before, telling people you gotta fix this, fix that, or we canceling you, and you're dealing with poor folks, and they want you to do capital improvements on these houses, and then they're not insuring them. And if you can't get insurance, who's gonna move in a place where you can't insure a house, where you can't insure the property? It makes it virtually worthless.
Good point. I wanted to backtrack 1 second to the significance of an instance where the city fought for something. The hospital and the post office. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I don't think I was here. I don't think I recall the one with the post office, but of course the hospital I remember vividly. Them closing her and Rowe Hospital. I remember when talking to Travell about it the first time, and I said, you know what, Travell? No, it wasn't even Travell. It was somebody else. And And I said, you know, I said, the best thing I hope they get out of this is that they get rid of the building, that Cleveland Clinic tears the building down. I said, and don't leave us with that building, and they said, oh, they can give us this, they can do this, that. I said, no. I said, that building is gonna cost too much to renovate. It's a huge monstrosity. Who's gonna operate? It's a guzzler. It's a money pit. So I said, I hope they get rid of the building. But then Mr. Hank came on the scene and got people fired up. And y'all went down there and challenged Cleveland Clinic to be a good corporate citizen. You know, and Toby, you know, was in his right mind, because he knew he couldn't afford for this thing to drag on, and he saw the light that he had to do something, because they have the money. Cleveland Clinic has always been an issue with them about whether they're private or public, or whether they're nonprofit or not, and they sit on money, so they got plenty of money over there, you know. And they had ventures and ambitions going on outside of Cleveland. And they didn't need Hank messing that up. So, you know, they had to do what was socially responsible. So I think you know, and I remember now after that I did talk to DeVille, and he was a little disenchanted because he didn't think they got enough. He thought they could have got more. I said, maybe you could have, you know. But I said, this is a big deal, a huge deal. I said, because you go all over this country. You go right over to Cleveland. How long did it take them to get that Fisher, that property cleaned up over there on 152nd? That was a pit, a waste pit for the longest time, contaminated. And I think GM owned that property, and they couldn't get anybody to clean that property. The Carling plant over there on Quincy, a chemical pit. Never could get anybody to clean that stuff up. We got property all over the city that ain't even worth building on because it's contaminated. And I said, and these companies just leave here and leave us the junk. All over this country they do that. They don't clean nothing up. They don't tear nothing down. I said, y'all got them to tear it down and you got some change. I said, that's a big deal.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've been saying that to people. I've been telling them to check their records. Across this country, hospitals have been closed. And it's not really their obligation to do that.
No.
For the record, can you tell us who Travell Harp is?
Travell Harp is the executive director of NOAH, Northeast Ohio Alliance for Hope.
Okay. We're going to the next question. What is your vision for the future of East Cleveland? Tell us about the major issues that need addressing in order to better the neighborhood, community, and city.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that for me?
No problem. What is your vision for the future of East Cleveland? And with that, tell us about the major issues that need addressing to better East Cleveland, the neighborhood, the community, the city.
I'm hopeful about the future of East Cleveland. You know, this is a place that not only has good physical assets, you know, but it has great people here, you know. I mean, you have a genuine sense of community when you are in East Cleveland, and there are in many places where you can say that now. I think I think we got resources here that we could really tap into and build. We got transportation, we have location, we got new school buildings, educational centers, and we got elementary schools that are second to none in this town. We got really good elementary schools. We got a high school that has great students that are doing wonderful things. I think we need to publicize that. I think we need a communications vehicle to really talk about what happens in East Cleveland, what's going on in East Cleveland. You know, we need to be able to communicate that in some kind of way. We got to put education back at the top of the agenda. Education is the great equalizer. And one thing I'd like to see that I've seen in other cities is a renaissance of people moving back to this city who may not necessarily, who may have grown, descended from folks who grew up here. Young people, you know, that's where it's gonna come from, you know. There's a little city in Columbus, a little neighborhood in Columbus that's very similar to East Cleveland, and similar plight and everything. And one of the things that happened is that young people started coming back in, building those houses up, and I mean, just it's a beautiful neighborhood, but there's still a mix there. And I won't go into the whole story because there was some contention there with the folks coming in and the people who are already still there. But the point is that these young people coming in have transformed this neighborhood, you know. And I think that's where the transformation is going to come from. It's going to come from young people who are going to see this and value it, not people who've been entrenched in this whole Cleveland thing of, you know, this side of town is better than that side of town. Because I think you got a lot, you know, right now, that's what a lot of people are entrenched in, you know. But I think it's going to take new blood, people to see it from a new prism.
Any other issues you think need addressing, major issues that would help East Cleveland? You got education, people moving back in, youth, and a new mindset. Anything else you think needs addressing as you think back to what deteriorated or helped the city deteriorate?
Yeah, I think we need a change in government and governance. I should say a change in governance. You know, I think we need to look at the leadership and have higher expectations of our leaders. And hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do. And I think we need to tap into also our political capital outside of East Cleveland. I think you're going to increase in political participation will do that, because politicians go where the votes are. That's just the natural order of things. And I think as we increase participation in East Cleveland, we got to reach out to congressmen and senators and state representatives, because I think they can help us. I think they would be willing to hook up resources. But we got to have our house in order to do that. We got to get some good governance.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. That's the last question here. What would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland better?
Well, I'll be willing to help probably in any way that I could, with time and, you know, whatever resources I could afford, by helping organize people, helping educate folks, doing some workshops, improving the political awareness of folks in the community.
I know you mentioned NOAA earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Are you active in NOAA?
Yes,
Tell us a little bit about NOAA and what you do with NOAA.
I'm a board member with NOAA. I have been for, I don't even remember, I think about 4 years. And I currently participate in helping organize, do educational forums, participate in workshops. I've moderated a couple of candidates forums. This budget workshop that we recently did. Just doing things around organizing, preparing written materials.
And NOAA's primary goal or purpose?
Our goal and purpose is empowerment. It's the empowerment of people, so that they can have a say in their destiny. They can participate and have a say in the betterment of their communities.
Okay. Are you active in any other organizations or?
Yes, I'm also a founding member of the Shaw High School Alumni Association. And I don't know if you're aware, we do the big alumni weekend.
Oh, I'd like to thank you for that.
You are quite welcome.
I think I've missed maybe 1-2 years.
Oh, okay. Don't miss this year.
Always a great time.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And we also do youth summits. We did two. We've done 2 youth summits. We do scholarships every year. The weekend is a part of our scholarship and fundraiser. So we'll be doing the weekend and youth summit this year.
I'm surprised to see how many people had rainproof tents.
Yes. Do you believe that?
I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, well, let me go down later because no one's going to be there.
Everybody said that.
Draining.
Everybody said that.
So by the time I got there, there was nowhere to park. And I look over and I'm like, where did all these tents come from?
Do you believe it?
I'm talking about black people campers. I didn't know we was campers like that.
Do you believe it?
It was beautiful.
It was incredible. It's incredible. Every year is more incredible than the last.
More incredible. You know, one of the best things, one of my last years there, I got to fight with this guy.
Really?
And he was one of the
at the show, school
guys
that you saw.
Made eye contact, made a beeline, gave each other some grip, gave each other some love, sat there and chopped it up for about 5 minutes. About all that.
Yeah.
That is the beautiful thing about
That
it.
is.
So I gotta commend the Alumni Association on that event, on that weekend.
Hey, it's our pleasure. It is.
And at this time, I'd like to defer to Hank and see if he has any questions, any follow-up questions for you.
Well, it looks like you answered just about all the questions. I would write them down, and then they would come back, and you would answer them.
Okay.
But I did want to know, are your brothers still in this area?
Yes, they are. Yeah, one lives in Cleveland and the other is in Warrensville Heights.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
by the way, my youngest brother, his daughters graduated from Shaw. Yeah.
You spoke on the Forest Hills Shopping Center when you were coming up. Was there any black-owned businesses in that shopping area?
The only one I remember was your dad's.
Mm-hmm. King Shoes Restaurant.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the only one I recall at the time. Yeah.
And one other question. You spoke about the other municipalities in the area and how you didn't think they were supportive of East Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think they're not supportive of this city?
Well, just by some of the things that, I hear some of the residents say, and then some of the responses to things that happen there, they routinely, want to blame East Cleveland, especially when they have something involving youth. They want to blame East Cleveland when it's really them overreacting to something, they had this whole discussion about, whether they were going to do this festival last year, and they decided not to do it. And a lot of it was just overreaction. People, they don't want to take a chance. Their business, they think their business areas are so fragile that if they have incidents, people won't patronize the businesses, And so whatever they can do, that's why they don't do the Coventry Street Fair anymore,
And they blame it on East
And they blame it on East Cleveland,
I said that was the last question, but I did have one more concern. You spoke of Dr. Cosgrove and the events that happened in closing of Huron Road Hospital. Do you think he was supportive in trying to keep that hospital here?
Oh, no. I think it was a business decision to close the hospital, and I knew that it was going to close. But I did not think that the efforts to protest to keep it open were in vain at all. I knew it could possibly lead to some type of reparation, so to speak, or some other type of health facility, which they did open another health facility. We're in such proximity to the greatest medical institutions in the country. I didn't think that the area would suffer in terms of their access to care, in terms of having some place to go. Now, there are other impediments to access, money, insurance, da-da-da. But I think in terms of having a facility here, I thought our proximity was close enough to University Hospital and Cleveland Clinic that it wouldn't suffer that much. But I kind of knew that it was a business decision that they made. They decided to invest their money out there and not here.
Okay, well, is there anything else you would like to add to this interview?
I want to thank you guys. Y'all made this so easy. It was nice talking to y'all.
These interviews have been great. We usually ask for some parting words of wisdom.
Oh, you want a parting word of wisdom? Oh, this is a great effort. Oral history is a big deal. My dad did oral histories with his uncles and some of his aunts, before they passed. He put them on audio tape, though, and they somewhere in the house. But every time they come, he would turn the tape recorder on and get them talking, about family and stuff, But yeah, this is good. I was a little apprehensive at first, didn't know what to expect, but.
I'm glad we went through this, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. You're
I'd like to
welcome.
thank Hank, our videographer, for the day.
Yes.
That'll do it.
Okay.
We're coming back just for a quick take two on this. And I wanted to briefly ask you about your political fight or your union fight or your fight to make things right. You got some of that from your father, because I know he was instrumental in some of the real estate laws, I believe it was, come through the country. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my dad is very steeped in politics, political history and history period. So growing up, I heard a lot of that, stories. Because he talks a lot, as you know. So we heard a lot of that, and I did get a lot of my awareness and desire to be involved in politics from him, and his stories, and also his history. He was a realtor who kind of broke the color barrier in Cleveland Heights or some of the other suburbs. He moved some of the first black families in neighborhoods, all over the east side here, and and had to file lawsuits to get some of those houses closed. He always attended a lot of the fair housing workshops that they used to have in Cleveland. And they did a lot of work. One thing I will say about Cleveland Heights, they did a lot of work in terms of trying to prevent white flight from Cleveland Heights. So they did do a lot of community outreach. They did, you know, a lot of meeting with realtors and the training sessions on, you know, redlining and stuff like that. So they had a lot of discussions around the issue, and and they really worked hard at maintaining a diverse community, unlike some of the other areas here in Cleveland. But yeah, my dad was he is a political animal, all the way from talking about Jim Crow and what it was like when he went back down south when George Wallace was on the ballot to be governor, and he would talk to people about, you know, the election, and he would run into black people that would say, well, we hope George Wallace win. And we said, why would you? He said, well, he would ask them, why would you want George Wallace to win? You know, that guy is a stone racist, you know? And they would say, because if we get some moderate in there, like the guy who was running against him, he said, things just gonna go even keel like this. But George Wallace gonna take it all the way to the right. So it's gonna get good and ugly, and things will change. So, I mean, just hearing stories like that, you know, and just kind of understanding strategy, you know, because he knows politics. That's the one thing he does know. He knows politics, and sometimes we disagree on things, and, you know, sometimes and occasionally I'm right a few times, but not too often, but.
You and I got that same problem. Ironically, our fathers sold real estate together. So that's one of the first things he told me when I came over to the interview.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
okay, we'd like to thank you again.
Thank you.